Hey, John, I'll just give an overview of React um, using the Notebook project to kind of look at some of the aspects of it. First, though, I'll just talk about web frameworks in general. There's three major ones: React, Angular, and Vue. Um, Vue is kind of, I think, an independent thing, but Angular was created by Google and React was created by Facebook. Vue and Angular are actual web frameworks where there's like all this infrastructure and in place to link up HTML and JavaScript to actually take the JavaScript and build out the HTML to render. Um, so they're thought of as actual web frameworks, whereas React is actually just a library for JavaScript. So everything you do in React is just JavaScript, and Facebook kind of developed this their kind of own version of HTML inside of JavaScript called JSX. So everything you do in React is just JavaScript. So that's a little bit maybe a little bit nicer to deal with. You're not actually dealing with HTML as in the case of the other JavaScript based web frameworks. So if we just take a look at the Notebook project, we can see at the root of the project is index.js, and there's just some boilerplate stuff here at the beginning. I don't even really know exactly what it's doing other than like getting from the DOM, like the document, getting the root, and then setting that up, and then um, just basically building out a empty kind of React shell. I think that's what it's doing. But that's just some boilerplate, and that's the root of the project. And really, where it starts is app.js. And for me, this is really just the place to kind of route the URLs in the browser to all the various components that I've built out. So, like the root path just goes to the books, and then all the other ones kind of have more, um, you know, different. We can kind of see that if you drill into different parts of the app, the URL changes. A lot of times, app.js is where the app component's the thing that routes that traffic to the various components. So if we just look at books, that's that main page here. Um, we can see the books component. That's like the list of the cards for the books. Um, it is just a function, really, as are all the React components. They're really just functions. There is an older version of React which is class-based, so these are classes instead. You can still use that. You can mix them together, but the kind of the slightly more modern way is uh, just functions. So it's an arrow function, but it's just a function. And so components are functions, and at the bottom, at the last thing, every component will do is return some of that JSX, some of that JavaScript embedded or um, HTML embedded within JavaScript. So you can use um, regular HTML. You can use your own components that you've built in this kind of tag format, like an HTML tag. A lot of times too, you'll use just stuff from the kind of like some of the React kind of standard libraries for things like buttons and stuff like that, which we can see here. Um, and there's a lot of different packages, but Material is a common one, and you can have drop downs and um, buttons and button groups and checkboxes, and there's all these different pieces that you can use to put together a web page. Um, so I'm using that here. I've got a card which is just like this kind of box here that it's all inside, and then I got buttons and stuff like that. So that's kind of that's what that's the return value of every component in React is some of this HTML. Um, and so that of course is being like returned to this tag right here. So it renders right here. Um, so that's kind of the main thing. And then of course in this inside of this function, there are any number of other functions. Again, it's kind of more of a modern thing. You could, if you wanted to, say function X, whatever. Um, but the more modern way is to define a function as an arrow function, or to create an arrow function and actually just set it to a variable, basically. So that's a pretty common way to do it, is to use arrow functions. So you got all these functions, and then at the top, this is kind of the interesting thing about React, and it's partly where it gets the name React. Um, you've got these what are called hooks, and these are functions that will set up reactive variables essentially. You can make variables just like it's still JavaScript, so you can just create a variable called X, set it to 10, but this will not be reactive. What you can do instead is set up what's called state, local state, and you do that with this use state function call. So if you define an array and set it equal to a call to use state, passing in an initial value, the first element in that array is going to be your variable, and the second element is going to be your setter function for that. And as long as you use that setter function to update that variable, um, this is going to be reactive. This thing's going to be, we're going to have we're going to be able to watch this and stuff like that, which I can show here. So, for example, um, this right here, editing book ID, this is like when you're editing a book, it's just keeping track of which, because this is like a list actually, right? I've only got one there, but we can create a few of these here just to underscore the fact that this is a list of your books. So when you go to edit one, we need to know its ID to keep track of which one we're going to update. So that's what this part of the state is. And as long as that's being updated via this function, the setter function, when you enable edit, you set it here. When you cancel it, you just set it to a default. Um, this when this variable changes, we can actually go ahead and watch that, and we can do it by the use of this by using this use effect hook, which I will just do here briefly. And well, I'll just type it out. So use effect is a function, and it takes as its first parameter a function. So I'll just do sort of the simplest function, arrow function right there. Takes a first parameter, a function, and the second parameter is an array of dependencies. And so the way it works is this function here is going to fire when something in this dependency array, part of the state, changes. So I'll show that now. So if we put a put like let's say in our function here, we just kind of print in JavaScript, you just console log. So we'll do just say hello variable changed or something like that. And then so we'll watch this we'll watch this variable here, editing book ID, by putting it into this dependency array. And so what we can do now is come over here and just bring up the console, and then so it loaded some when it initially loaded. I'll just refresh just to get a clean start. So as soon as I go to edit, it 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 executed my function when that variable changed. So that's an example of how you can create state and have it be reactive and have changes to it um, kick off other things, make other things happen. So that's a big part of React. In this case here, you can see use effect is being used with nothing in there. If you have nothing in there, that's the same as like a constructor. That means that this will run once when the component first is created. So that's what happens if you have an empty one. So what I'm doing here is when the component first loads, this use effect will be kicked off and it'll call get data. And this is a function which calls the backend to get the books. And so that leads to another topic that you can actually create in addition to like the use state hook and the use effect hook. And there's some other built-in hooks. You can create your own hooks like I've done here. And this is a hook to make a network call. I won't go into all this kind of stuff here, but it's somewhat boilerplate. It's just basically a place to make a network call via this Axios instance. Axios is a React library to call to make HTTP calls. So that's really all this is doing is setting up the base URL for the backend, and then you just create a hook, um, and the way you can just kind of make this is a custom hook, and it basically um, in that same way that use state creates this reactive thing, this thing um, will create a function that can call the backend, so it can make a network call, and then it'll handle populating whatever it comes back from that network call into a variable. In this case, a books array. And then, of course, I'm not using them here in this component, but you've got, if there was an error, you'd have like a Boolean true or false, or if it's loading, if the call is still being made. So yeah, you can make custom hooks as well. So React hooks are a big part of React. And then I guess another thing to say is just so this books array, for example, when the component loads, the call is made to fetch the data. When it comes back, it lands in this book array. We can see down here in the return for this component, we can see we've got inside of a div this books array. If its length is greater than 0, um, we will basically loop. Map is a JavaScript array function built into all arrays that sort of iterates over every element in the array and then calls an arrow function, a lambda function on every element in there. And so this is how that list of books, that list of cards with books on them is actually being created. It's being created in a loop. So we're looping over the books and then calling this render function, which is just above it, my own function here, which, if we're in the edit case, return the component for editing a book. Otherwise, just return the book component. And so yeah, and that's another thing to mention too. Like one way to create and destroy components is to just you can literally just say you can just have a variable that you can wrap curly braces around a boolean and your component, and if that thing is true, if this is true and your component, it'll render your component, it'll build it. When this goes false, it'll destroy it. So that's what's going on here. If the books array has got something in it, um, loop through them and render each of them. And you can see we can go into the book itself. And so you can see that you can pass, so we're passing in functions and data from this books component into each of the components, each of the book components. So that's how it takes in data. A child component takes in data from a higher scope, gets passed in this way. And yeah, and then in this book component can show all the stuff. And so that's all really it is. It's a lot of these components that render this specialized HTML. You're not actually dealing with a lot of HTML. That's one nice thing about React. It's mostly functions and objects and stuff like that. Um, and yeah, like I said, you can. I'm using some raw HTML here, some divs, but you could really even avoid all of that and use a lot of the React built-in stuff. And yeah, so that's basically how it works. I'll talk to you later. Bye.